Hello, everybody. It's our first time doing this. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reconnected. I'm Pastor Sean, your host. This is going to be sort of a test. It's a little bit later at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. We're going to do something we're calling unscripted. We just kind of have random topics that we're going to sort of pull out of a hat, as it were, and discuss with them. I've got at least one guest coming on, possibly two. A buddy of mine named Zach, and a buddy of mine named Sam. We're going to let them discuss things. They may or may not have video, so we'll see. So let's go ahead and bring these guys in. Hello, Zach, and hello, Sam. How are you?
Doing all right.
We are live. All right.
How about you?
Good. Yes, I'm talking to avatars. They don't have their cameras on. We'll forgive them for that. But they are, I have rest assured, they are real people. Sam, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
So we're just kind of gonna just have a little fun, have a good conversation. And the point of this podcast is to help people reconnect to God during these challenging times. So we're gonna, and just so you know, part of this show, we look at things from a Christian perspective, but we're not gonna be afraid to shy away from topics that might be taboo, because Jesus didn't do that. So let's just start with let's have a discussion around politics in general, whether that's what's going on in Congress with the impeachment, COVID restrictions, that sort of thing, and just talk about some opinions and get some perspective on that. I shared a little bit with mine, and I shared a little bit with mine just briefly on the stream Monday night. We're going to be, this isn't going to be, again, these are difficult topics, but we're not going to shy away from the conversation. And let's make sure everything keeps it civil. And if we do get comments, please be civil, please be respectful of people. So, Zach, you want to take that? My spiel has been, that as Christians, we have, we are privileged to have certain rights. The Bible is very clear that regardless of what other government we're living under, there are certain standards that every Christian should try to uphold. Yet, those of us who live in the United States anyway, we do have certain rights and responsibilities that come with those rights, and there is, I think, a reasonably objective opinion, and it's a reasonable position to take, even though it's not shared by everyone, that on some level, some of those rights are being infringed upon in ways that are scary, uncomfortable, maybe even perhaps dangerous. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. Zach, I'll let you start with whatever you want to start with, because I know you've got opinions.
That is a broad topic, my friend.
Well, I can narrow it down for you. Let's talk about COVID.
Well, we'll take a swing at it all at once.
Okay.
So, the Bible doesn't talk much about us and rights whatsoever.
Good point. Very good point.
Makes it a bit tricky. I very much enjoy the rights that I have here in America. I like that the government has been restricted by the founding documents and the governing documents of the country, that it can't impinge on certain rights. In fact, it can't impinge on anything that's considered a right. Anything that it can is a privilege. But that's a different definition than a lot of folks take. We would really need to define terms both from what we're using and what the general public uses. But going to what our point is, and I'm not going to go delve into those definitions, though I probably should. It's just hard to do with a fly-by-the-seat of your pants.
Well, and your point is well taken, though, because you are absolutely, from a biblical perspective, your point is well taken. The Bible talks about that we're supposed to be slaves, not to sin, but to God, to Jesus, which is, for most Americans, I think, is probably almost in some ways a foreign concept, right?
It's anathema.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And so I said Monday night, you didn't see the stream when we were originally going to have you on, but I said, there is a little bit of a tension there. And for me as a pastor, the line that I sort of draw is how do these decisions, not so much to how they affect me, but how do they affect other people? I use the example, there was a gentleman story of a homeless person in Canada who had been kicked out of his housing shelter, because allegedly, and I say allegedly because I wasn't able to vet that part of the story as it was presented in the news. But essentially, because of the COVID restrictions in the province where he lives in Canada. Now remember, Canada doesn't have quite the same rights and privileges that we do. We enjoy in the United States. The laws are a little bit different in that area. But regardless, the decision by the government or by some entity forced this person out of a homeless shelter, and this person promptly froze to death. Because this was Quebec. This was the province of Quebec. So, and I thought, well, now that's probably something that's unjust and should probably be dealt with in an appropriate manner. That was just kind of my take on it. But that gives you an idea where I sort of come from on some of this. But
I have different. I'm not a fan of the government providing services like that. I'm not saying it oughtn't, but that should be provided by individuals. Because when the government makes silly decisions, people suffer.
Well, and we don't.
When people make silly decisions, people
I
suffer.
am unaware. Yeah, and just so you know, I am unaware whether this was a public or private-run shelter. That information was not provided.
Well, regardless of that, if it's anything related to Christianity, if it's a Christian movement, or if there's a Christian shelter nearby, just like we being Christians in our history throughout most, if not all, I think I'm right on this, all plagues that the church has been around for, we've gone and rushed in where angels fear to tread, if you will.
Yes, very true indeed.
But that's the Christian response more than the political response. I know that they're intertwined, but sometimes it makes it, like I said earlier, it makes it just a bit tricky. Because the Bible doesn't address our rights. It says that we should be, we render to Caesar what is Caesar's. If we're told to walk a mile by the soldier, then we go ahead and we offer a second mile. Mm-hmm. If we're slaves, we're to work as for God. And if we're masters, we're supposed to treat those that are under us that could essentially be viewed as mere property as brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are not, easy topics. It's a very, very well taken. Sam, you're muted over there. Are you hiding, or you're joining the conversation here?
I was waiting for a good time to.
Okay.
Well, I had a good opinion. I just didn't want to interrupt you guys with any noise I made.
No, you did.
But it's a rather difficult subject, because as a person, as a man, I get rather upset when government does anything that maybe even hints at infringing on my rights. But as a Christian, we, like the point was made earlier, the Bible does not mention any rights from the government that are protected by God, other than the right to life. Other than what's mentioned in the Ten Commandments: don't steal, don't kill. So as Christians, really, it is a tough subject, because as our flesh is wanting to say, no, you can't do this, you can't stop us from going to church, you can't impose any undue sanctions that are keeping us from doing what we want to do. But again, in our spirits, there is the verse that says, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. And yeah, it's a tough decision. It's always the battle. It's always the struggle between flesh and spirit.
Building off of what Sam just said, I would have to go with that verse and the story about Daniel. So Daniel's told by the king, he's close with the king. The king actually enjoys this man as a friend. Guess what? No one can worship anyone but me. And what does Daniel do? Not that.
Nope.
He goes and worships as he always has done. And what does he do when he has to face the consequences? He faces the consequences. He doesn't try and weasel his way out.
Right.
Same thing with any time that Christians have been in a position where they had to maintain their faith,
Right.
disobey a law. God doesn't say weasel your way away from the consequences. You're still
Right.
rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It just sucks that sometimes those consequences are the ultimate sacrifice.
Right.
In fact, those
Do-
consequences are foretold. Jesus
Yes.
himself said we would face persecution for his name's sake.
Is it, you think maybe one thing I wondered about as you were talking, Zach? Do you think maybe one of the things that this is maybe just me, maybe this observation is completely wrong. I've noticed, and I've even been guilty of this at times, that in our culture, especially in the United States, that accepting responsibility or accepting the consequences, or even just accepting the responsibility, is not something that it's almost like we've seen it in our highest levels of government, right? How many times have you heard a politician actually take responsibility for something they did or didn't do, right? Hardly ever, right? Now, part of that's politics, but we've told kids, it's not your fault, it's somebody else's fault, right? Do you think maybe there's somewhat of a correlation there? And maybe some of this stuff is seeped into the church, or,
I think that's purely human nature. If you read through the writings of any great philosopher, you'll find, and Marcus Aurelius sticks out in my mind, Plato, Aristotle, all of the above, you read through what they say and you get the same thing. No one takes responsibility anymore.
right?
It's human nature. So yes, it's absolutely in the church. I think the main difference now is that it's easy, not harder to see. It's easier to see because we have the continual social media. As soon as anyone does anything, bam, it's out there for everyone. Let alone the 24/7 news stations that need to hype things up to make money.
Right.
So yes, it's definitely in the church. I mean, I hate to even. No, I don't hate to bring it up. It needs to be brought up. It's just unfortunate.
No, it does.
But look at the scandals in the church, and there are myriad sexual abuse of minors, especially. Who takes responsibility for it? No one. The pastor hides it forever. The church tends to hide it forever to protect their glorious leader. All praise be to that leader. And it's bad. But the human nature is we protect our little tiny tribe,
And
even if it goes against our proclaimed morals.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I was chuckling when you were. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, remember, I'm a pastor, so I am not glorious leader. Dear God.
But look at how people treat a lot of pastors.
I know.
They like them as this godhead figure almost.
And it's infuriating to me. As I've seen that. I go out of my way to tell people, look, I am a sinner just like you. Okay, I have my own faults. I have my own flaws. Tear to leave it, So how do? Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say that kind of idolization of man is rather prohibited in the Bible. As a matter of fact, there were times when they idolized even good men. They tried to idolize good men. For example, God himself manifested in the flesh. Somebody said, "Good master," and he said, "Don't call me good."
No one is good except for my Father.
Yes, so very true.
So it seems to me that anybody who's idolizing a man, who's idolizing the flesh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Do not make for yourselves graven images, right? An idol can be just about anything.
Yeah, why congratulate the clay when it was the potter that made it?
Zach, you mentioned Daniel earlier, and I think that's one where I think that's a story that probably has a lot of lessons for us that people are sort of overlooking. The thing that sticks out in my mind is I was thinking about really there's a story in there that we don't talk a whole lot in church, even in Christian culture, right? Everybody talks about Daniel in the lion's den, and everybody talks about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Everybody knows that part of the story. But there's a point at the very beginning of the book of Daniel where, Daniel and all his buddies are in Babylon, and they're getting their new names, right? And then all of a sudden, there's this decree about what the slaves are supposed to be eating, and they don't, because some of the food is not kosher, the food is not within their dietary restrictions, they don't eat it, and the guards get scared because they're like, well, you have to, because if you don't eat this and you get sick and die, you're not going to be the only one who's dead. Because I'm responsible for making sure that you are healthy and fed and well kept, right? And then Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, tell you what, give us only what we want to eat. And what happens? They are healthier, and so it ends up changing everybody else's diet. And it's one of these stories we overlook because it's a demonstration of who God is, first of all. It's a demonstration of trust in God. And, they sort of know what's going to happen, but they really don't in that context. I thought that was a very interesting. When you said Daniel, it was the first thing I thought of, because that's one that I see overlooked constantly in the church. Nobody ever preaches on that, which is a shame. It'd be great if you have a lot of vegans in your church, I suppose. And I think you're right. We don't want to face the consequences. We don't want to, and I think sometimes, for me, I know, sometimes it takes a little bit because of my own human nature to say, okay, is this a hill to die on? Is this something where a line in the sand must be drawn, or is this something that I can have a different response to?
That's always... Oops, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's always a tough thing. And I always end up looking to my other training to cope with anything like that. You have to know what battles to fight and what battles not to, and honestly, most of them aren't worth it. It's better to go ahead and let a lot of things slide. You spend more time ducking your head and running from building to building in the rain, and you still get wet.
Right.
You look at the samurai who walks with his head held high. He's just as wet as you are, but he walks with pride, and he looks formidable while he does it. Instead of scurrying about like some sort of bedraggled rodent, he holds his head high and proudly. He still gets wet. He's simply not afraid of the consequence.
There's an image for you. I have to remember that one. So,
and one other point, if you don't mind.
Okay, go for it.
We're not called to be idiots. We're called to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves at the very same time.
Ow, 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 ow. How dare you quote the Bible? I'm kidding, of course.
Is important.
Very, very true. Very true.
Besides, we all know pastors don't have a sense of humor.
I usually get this, my wife and I do this back and forth all the time. My wife, if you haven't watched this, go back and watch the first episode. My wife was on the first show, and it was good stuff there. So, what would you say? Kind of wrap this up because it's kind of a proof of concept stream, but what would you say things are going to look like? You guys aren't prophets. None of us are. I mean, maybe you are. I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you? What do you think we are in for, just in general, in terms of the church in the United States, especially with COVID, with whether it's something on the political level or sort of all of the above. What do you sort of see on the horizon as something that you can kind of may or may not happen, but you see as sort of the likely outcome, assuming there isn't something that changes trajectory of certain things?
I think I can take a gander at that one. Couple different things I think will happen. And again, I'm no prophet, and I don't claim to be. I hope nobody ever claims me to be, because some pretty dire consequences when you do that. But based on what I see now, a couple different things could happen. Number one, a bunch of people start getting together in smaller groups in their house, which will force them to rely on themselves and not on, like what you said earlier in those cases, a glorious leader, which could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing, depending on how bad those individuals need that glorious leader. So, if the glorious leader is failing them, then these lockdowns could have been God's way of saying, hey, you probably need to get together with your friends and read the Bible and listen to what it says rather than what somebody else is saying is it. But also either strengthen faith or destroy it. It depends entirely on the individual. So really no grand revelations here.
Right.
Just my personal thoughts on the subject.
That's it. You're up.
I see a couple different options. COVID will eventually pass. There's only so long that you can keep a health emergency up, even if the worst conspiracy is somehow magically true and every doctor out there is part of the grand world order that is hiding in the shadows, ready to kidnap you and do whatever they want to do with your body. You can only have the disaster go on for so long. I know that a temporary thing is the most permanent, but that's not going to be the deciding factor for it. It might impact how things are done, but I don't see it being a long-term thing.
Right.
As for the political stuff, that's dicey. Either we're going to have, I think Sam is correct, we're going to see churches go much smaller. They're already headed that way overall. The mega churches are becoming lesser and lesser. Yeah, I remember reading an article recently about how Orthodox and Catholic churches need to have their, oh no, I forgot what it was. Their Dunkirk moment.
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
Where they are in a full retreat trying to save what they can so they can continue. But they're going to lose some materiel in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see a bit of withdrawal. And then from there, either we see, and this could be a both and, but I think it'll be an either or, at least for the beginning. We'll see the church either experience significant persecution, or we'll see a significant revival. Again, that could be very much a both and, but that's not anything in the immediate future. That's probably 10, 20 years down the road before that's an actuality, either of them. But it really depends on God for all of it, of course.
Yeah. I definitely think a revival, probably with some measure of persecution, is definitely on the horizon now. I think what will be interesting is, and we're seeing this, most Christians, at least that I know of, they always think of persecution as, in the physical life-death kind of stuff. Now, of course, we know that that's a fallacy. Persecution can mean a lot of things. But, there's an old saying that goes, alive and ruined is a whole lot better than dead and martyred. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. We already are seeing a lot of that.
Yay, cancel culture.
Yeah, cancel culture, right? So let's, as we're sort of wrapping up here, we got 2 viewers. Hey, cool. Real
That's
quick,
7 more than we expected.
I didn't do it, and I don't know. I haven't learned how to edit this thing just yet. So,
Oh, no.
Sam and Zach, can you give some intros of who you are, just what you want people to know about you, and we'll go with that. Sam, go first.
Well, not really much to tell. I'm just a guy from Minnesota that moves around a lot. Born and raised Christian. Don't really plan on changing anytime soon. I'm rather political, but right now I'm trying to justify the difference between politics and faith. And it can be rather difficult sometimes, but that's really all that's relevant at the moment.
Well, I'm Zach. I am an aspiring pastor, hoping to
Yes.
make that into a full-time deal, but that'll depend on God and a little bit of a roll of the dice in my case. I have a couple bachelor's degrees, one in psychology, one in music. I have performed professionally across the globe, which sounds really arrogant now that I hear it out loud, but it's actually true.
This translation, Zach is not just some guy I picked up off the street and begged him to be on a podcast. Not
You make
really.
it sound so dirty. I'm also a martial artist of nearly 20 years.
Yes.
And by day, though, a mild-mannered administrative assistant. When the call is made, many other things.
Yes, very, very true. Okay, we got Sam back, haven't we?
I
There
should
we
also
go.
probably give my faith history, too.
Yes.
Grew up in the church, but it was a weak church, I'll admit. I remember the reason that my parents left was that they said when Jesus fed the 5,000, he didn't actually cause a miracle. It was just that everyone brought out their lunches to share. It was after that when we went to a church that taught actual Bible without the editorial commentary when I became a full Christian.
Oh, man. Yes.
And
so-
I've been ever since.
Excellent. I'm Pastor Sean, host of the show, and for those of you who haven't seen the show already, I'm a United Methodist pastor, really just a pastor serving God, and since Zach gave his education, I do have a bachelor's and master's divinity, but none of those made me qualify. What? Yes, I'm a nerd. We established this. But no, I have a minor in computer programming, which might be the most important part of all of my training. So, just saying, no. And we did a couple people on. I put a link up on Facebook, but we'll play around with this format. This actually is not a bad idea, and just having a brief discussion. This was really more just proof of concept. Looks like it works pretty well. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe on YouTube and Facebook. I want to thank Sam and Zach for getting on tonight. Part of the reason we got on is just we got kicked off a game, which is annoying. But that wasn't the only reason we got on. But it was like, what do you want to do? You know what? Let's try this. But it's a good conversation. Hopefully we'll have more of them down the road. Anyway, I'm Pastor Sean. On behalf of Zach and Sam, have a good day, everyone. We will see you next time on Reconnected.
Be safe and be well.